So we are recording this session, so let me welcome everyone to the latest Transformix Tech Talk. This is the fourth in our series since reconstituting it, since I've come to Transformix. And we've had some great topics, and I'm really excited about the topic we have today. And it is on Cisco Duo, which in my opinion is a fantastic product. Yes, it's MFA or two-factor authentication, but it goes way beyond that. It's an excellent product. In my opinion, it would be a primary, very important component for like a Cisco-based zero trust architecture, in my opinion. Today, we've got Madeline Webb, a Duo security specialist with Cisco, presenting for us. Madeline, thank you for joining us. And I would be remiss if I didn't add that we've got one of the Cisco security sales folks on the call too, my old former colleague, Steve Massey. Welcome aboard, Steve. Before we get started, I do ask everyone, if you don't mind, mute your phones. And if you do have a question, feel free to shout it out. Or if you want, just put it in the chat window. We will be, as I said, we are recording this. We'll be sending out the recording link, so feel free to forward this recording on to anyone in your organization that you think might benefit from it. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Madeline Webb. Madeline, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Just to give you all some background in terms of my history at Duo, I've been with Duo for just about 4 years now, and working exclusively in the public sector space. So tend to be pretty familiar with Duo, of course, as a product, but also a lot of the use cases that come up in the public sector space, use cases in general with Duo, any compliance requirements that might impact our customers' needs for MFA and other secure access features and functionalities. So with that, I was planning to do a little high-level overview of Duo as a solution. Pat mentioned we're a lot more than just MFA, so talking a little bit about that, and then going over some end-user demos and what Duo might look like in the back end for you all if you were to have your own instance as a customer. And then, as Pat mentioned, please ask questions throughout. This is definitely intended to be interactive, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat or unmute. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I wanted to start out with essentially the Duo kind of vision and mission statement for our customers. So it's three-pronged, and really what we set out to do is to secure access for all of our users, regardless of which type of application they might be looking to connect to, and also securing access based on the device they might be using to both authenticate and also access said applications. And the reason for this is really because of the kind of current reality for all of our customers with regards to IT. Before, there was a very firm perimeter. People either worked from their office or they didn't work at all. All of their employees were full-time. They didn't have any kind of vendors or contractors trying to access their applications. And usually the only way for, certain bad actors to get in was, attackers directly accessing from stolen or compromised passwords or credentials. And now they have the option as well of kind of targeting some lower hanging fruit, which are out of compliance or out of date operating systems or softwares on the devices themselves as well. So also now with people working from home, the advent of cloud applications and other web-based logins, that perimeter is not really firm anymore. So Duo's kind of agenda, and the reason that we have that three-pronged mission statement, is to fill in a lot of those new gaps on that perimeter to ensure that you can have a pretty flexible and mobile workforce while also still maintaining the security of your organization. So with that, I will kind of drill down into those three different components here in a little bit more detail. I promise there won't be too many slides. I won't bore you before we go to the demos portion. But the first component of this, verifying user trust, we do that through multi-factor authentication. So with Duo, we have a pretty wide array of authentication method options that we can support from an MFA standpoint. The Duo push is definitely the most common and most popular amongst our customers. The Duo push makes up about 70 to 75% of authentication methods that go through Duo. It's incredibly secure, and it's also very easy for end users to leverage with the ability to just kind of tap the green check mark in order to successfully authenticate. We also have a rotating soft token that's stored in the Duo mobile app on that smartphone as well. If smartphones are off the table, SMS, text, or phone callback are also options. And then we can also support hardware tokens if phones in general are off the table. Typically, users or customers will leverage the U2F security key, like a USB type authentication device, or one of the more legacy style hardware tokens with a rotating code. We support biometrics through WebAuthn currently, and we will be rolling out an integration with Windows Hello hopefully later this year. One thing to note is you certainly don't have to keep all of these authentication methods enabled for your users. As administrators of Duo, you can toggle which ones you want available to them. And any policy you set within Duo can be set on a global level, so applying to all your users and applications, applying to specific users or user groups, and or applying specifically to certain applications. So lots of flexibility there. You can really change kind of the flavor of Duo depending on what the use case is or who might be accessing that application. A few other things to touch on with regards to MFA. The first is really just how easily Duo can integrate with your applications. Duo is an integrator. That's really what we do. And so it's pretty imperative that we're flexible enough that we can actually meet all of your use cases for MFA to make sure we're filling in those gaps, to make sure we're meeting those compliance requirements. So it really doesn't matter whether your use cases are entirely on-prem, entirely in the cloud, mixture between the two, whether you're a Microsoft shop or not, kind of whatever your IT environment looks like today, we will meet you where you are, but we're also flexible enough to change with you over time as well. So on that front, you don't really have to worry about change management, and you can really, look to Duo to be able to cover all your needs in your entire organization. Second component here is that Duo relies pretty heavily on users self-enrolling when it comes for deployment. You can send out an email asking them to enroll. You could also bake in the enrollment workflow the next time they go to log into a Duo protected application, and they can set up one or many of those authentication methods that I just went over on the previous slide. So on that front, provides a lot of autonomy for your users to be able to pick which authentication method is going to be working best for them. And it also means that it takes a lot of the burden off your IT help desk in order to get this solution deployed to your organization. And then the final piece here is that Duo does not handle any passwords for your organization, and that's very intentional by us. It's considered a security best practice to have some supply chain separation or separation of powers between who handles your primary credentials and who handles your secondary credentials. So on that front, with Duo not handling any passwords, but being your kind of secure access provider, that distinction exists, and you're following a security best practice from that standpoint. And then the final thing I'll mention here with regards to MFA is really just some of the most common use cases we see our customers approach us with when they're looking to use a solution like Duo. So, mentioning work from home, the increased kind of gaps in the perimeter from remote work, Any remote access points tend to be a top use case for our customers to tackle, whether that's VPN or RDP sessions. If you have any existing SSO or identity manager, Duo really easily can hook into that. Your email provider and also other Microsoft Stack services, whether it's the RAS server logins or even Windows Workstation logins. These are all the most common use cases we typically tackle just initially when customers approach us. And then once we get those kind of big priority items crossed off the list, then we'll start talking about some on-prem applications, maybe your HR, finance applications, other third-party cloud apps. If you have any custom web portals or custom in-house applications as well, that's typically a pretty easy lift for Duo to get in front of. Any questions on the MFA portion of Duo's functionality?
Yeah, folks, feel free to shout out any questions or just put them in the chat window if you like.
It's not a big thing, but I noticed on that drawing that you had where you listed wearables. I'm probably a little behind the times, but can you sort of give a sort of an example? It obviously looked like smartwatches, but how would that integrate in case users inquire?
Yeah, great question. So a great example would be if a user was wearing an Apple Watch, if they wanted to use the Duo push, they could get that push actually sent to the Apple Watch so that they could authenticate and approve that request from the Apple Watch on their wrist, as opposed to having to locate their phone. And the same is really true for any sort of wearable technology that can connect back to a mobile phone that can download the Duo mobile app from the App Store. That functionality exists.
Okay, so they would still it'd still be tied back to their cell phone number or something that the watch is monitoring or email account.
Yep, exactly. In the same way that those Apple Watches can receive other notifications kind of through the phone as a proxy, they'd be able to receive that Duo push request.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I don't see any other questions in the chat window, Madeline.
All right, I will proceed. So the second component here is the verifying device trust portion of the kind of Duo features and functionalities. So with that, Duo actually assesses the security posture of the devices, both, as I mentioned earlier, accessing your applications and also the smartphone that might be receiving that Duo push. So information that Duo looks at, is this device something your organization manages or oversees? Is it running up-to-date software? Does it have disk encryption? Is the system password set, both from a kind of endpoint standpoint and also from a mobile phone? Is a passcode and or biometrics turned on? Is your firewall solution enabled? Is your endpoint security agent enabled? Is your browser edition up to date? Lots of information that Duo collects, and this is not just on the devices that you all already own and manage and oversee and have probably some insight into. These could also be personal devices that users are leveraging to log in, whether that's their home computer that's running Windows XP still that they use to log into Office 365 when they're working at home, whether it's the hotel lobby computer they're using to do some work because they forgot their laptop on vacation. Lots of different endpoints out there accessing your systems, and this feature in particular gives you some visibility into that. Furthermore, I mentioned earlier that devices have become some low-hanging fruit from a bad actor standpoint. We typically see a lot of ransomware and malware attacks going after some out-of-date operating systems first, because they generally have some unpatched security fixes operating on their system. So then the final piece here is really other supplemental risk-based contextual access policies. From that front, You can use and leverage policies based on the user's network. Maybe you want them to remain in bypass mode when they're working from within the office. Maybe you want to block any anonymous or Tor networks. Maybe you want to do location-based policy. You can geofence with Duo on a country-by-country basis. You can also implement group policies, as I was mentioning on an earlier slide. So all of that combined with the device hygiene policies you can set, as well as just the MFA feature in general, contributes to what we call the zero trust workflow. So really what this looks like both from an end user and also on the back end of Duo is that your user logs into an application. We ask them to verify they are who they say they are through the MFA, while we're also checking to make sure that mobile phone receiving the push and that endpoint they're using to log into the application are meeting your organization's security standards, and then also checking to see if any of those other risk-based policies are flagged in that moment. Assuming all of that checks out, they successfully authenticate, everything else is meeting your organization standards, that user is going to get access to your application. And really, it's a lot of information that we digest, but from an end user perspective, it only takes 1 or 2 seconds in order for them to authenticate on a daily basis. Any questions before I hop to an end user demo?
I don't see any questions at this time in the chat window, Madeline.
Okay. Oh, perfect. So let me pull up. So I will walk through our kind of standard end user demo just for you all to see. And then I'll show you some kind of variations in how that might look depending on what policies you want to set for your end users. So as far as the end user experience goes, Duo only piggybacks on top of the exchange of primary credentials. So I mentioned we don't store any of your users' passwords. We're really just looking at usernames to determine, is this user someone that needs to be challenged for MFA? Does this user have any other policies that we need to apply to them? So it's only after this user enters their email and password, hits sign in, that they're going to be hit with this Duo iframe. So on a high level, this Acme logo will be replaced with your organization's logo. This need help link, when clicked, can display contact information for your IT help desk or whoever you might want to be answering any Duo related calls should they come up. But other than that, this is a Duo prompt for a user who's already set up actually more than one authentication device here, as you can see from the device dropdown. So this user is free to toggle between the authentication method devices they have enrolled on their account. On the back end, Duo actually supports up to 100 different authentication devices per user. Definitely never seen anyone get close to that, but that flexibility is there should you need it. We do recommend at least having a couple there. That way, you know, most people will use their iPhone, but if it's out of battery or they left it at home that day, maybe they've enrolled their landline, a tablet, or something else as a backup option should that situation arise. And from there, they also have the ability to toggle between those authentication methods that I talked about on one of those first slides as well. So when they have that device selected, they'll be presented with the options that correspond to that device, obviously depending on the fact that you've decided to enable all of those options for your end users.
Hey, Madeline.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd like to call out as a Duo user, now that I'm at Transformers, but also when I was at Cisco, it's a little thing, but that little checkbox at the very bottom, remember me for one day. Sometimes with MFA, users can get a little upset because they're always getting hit with, with the request to validate. That's the kind of tool right there and Duo has a lot of capabilities to adjust that to make it to reduce the friction for the users in terms of how often they have to be asked to provide their credentials. So we actually ran into that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Remember Me feature can be toggled again per user group, per application, or you could have it, set and applying to all your use cases and users with Duo. If you wanted to leave it enabled, you can also customize the length of time, anywhere from an hour to 365 days. A lot of our customers do like to turn this on, especially for a lot of the higher velocity applications like email. And typically we'll see 12 hours, 24 hours as probably the most common time interval to try and achieve users authenticating just once a day. But we do have some customers who, set it for once every 30 days, especially if it's a not as critical application. And then if you wanted to completely disable Remember Me to require MFA at every login attempt, for something like an HR or finance application, something a little bit more sensitive, you'd be able to do that as well. So from here, I'll walk you through what the Duo push looks like. Your user will come in here, hit send me a push, and they will get this login request, in this case to an iPhone. They'll open up this request. Again, that Acme logo will transition to the Duo push request as well. You'll see the application being accessed, the username, timestamp, geographical location. If you were sitting at home on a Friday night, not trying to do any work stuff, not trying to access your email, you'd be able to hit deny, and it seems fraudulent. This will send an alert to the IT administrators you've designated to receive such alerts. They will likely then follow up with that end user, have them change their primary credentials, and do whatever else might be necessary to mitigate the risk from that incident. Most of the time, however, your users will receive this push request because they asked for it, in which case they just hit approve. So I know that took a while to go through, but from an end user perspective, on a daily basis, they'll enter their primary credentials, hit sign in, request that push, open that push request, and hit approve. So it really only takes a couple of seconds, and not very burdensome, or doesn't really interrupt the workflow for your users very much. And then to show you what that end user experience might look like from the vantage point of a user who has some device policies applied to them. So I'll walk you through this scenario now where the administrators of Duo decided that they were going to set device policy, but instead of outright blocking an out of compliance user, they wanted to give them some time where it's just a warning. So you're going to see a very similar workflow here, primary credentials, Duo prompt, but you're going to see this orange banner here at the bottom saying, hey, your browser's out of date, and we'll also have this let's update it button. User can click that, get more information about what's out of date, and we actually hyperlink to instructions on how that user can update their browser themselves to self-remediate and get them back into compliance. So you'll notice this is kind of a theme of Duo, is that we're really passionate about empowering your end users to be able to set their own Duo accounts up, enroll their own authentication methods, self-remediate if a device is out of compliance, add a new authentication method at any point in time. Maybe they got a new phone, maybe they want to set up a new device. A lot of that is about giving them a lot of autonomy and flexibility in this solution. And then it's also on the other side of that coin is taking a lot of the burden off your IT help desk from having to hold a lot of hands by making a pretty intuitive and self-explanatory workflow. So you'll see here, because it's just a banner, the user was able to kind of skip through that, but they're still able to request a push here. They're still able to authenticate with Duo. However, you can take it a step further Here's an example of someone logging into VPN with an out of compliance device. And this administrator of Duo decided to outright block users who didn't have a device that was meeting their standards trying to access VPN. Maybe a little bit stricter rules than the ones they had for Outlook web access. So again, the user can see what is allowed. And again, we're going to walk them through how to update that. And this is true whether it's a browser update required, whether it's an operating system that needs updating. We will include those kind of hyperlinked instructions for users to self-remediate. Any questions on the end user demo standpoint?
Yeah, folks, if you have any questions, shout them out here. Wait, let's see. Here's a question. Okay, with using Duo, it seems to be difficult for employees to understand the process of adding and removing devices, such as getting a new phone. Can you go through that process on both the administrator employee sides? Can you talk to that a little bit, Madeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull up kind of what that self-enrollment workflow looks like, because it looks very similar to how users will be able to, will be able to add a new device at any time. So this is a high-level overview of what it looks like to set up a new device with Duo. So this is actually going to be the workflow that happens when your user needs to add a device at any point, and when your user is setting up their Duo account for the first time. So luckily, they'll already be familiar with this workflow from the time they set up their device. And so if they need to do it again to set up a new phone or to just add a different authentication method, they can always do that. So from the end user perspective, for a user who's already set up, as you were mentioning, this add a new device link amongst the other links on that Duo prompt, when clicked, will essentially lead them to this workflow. What kind of device do you want to add? If it's a mobile phone or even a landline, what's the phone number there? If it's a smartphone, let's have you install the Duo mobile app if you want to enable Duo push. It'll walk you through how to install the Duo mobile app, and from within the Duo mobile app, you'll scan the QR code to formally tie that Duo mobile app account to their Duo account so that they can authenticate moving forward. Great segue into the back end of Duo as well. I'm going to log in here. So I'll be sure to touch on kind of the devices portion, but I'll also kind of give you a high-level overview of the back end of Duo as well. So this is the Duo dashboard. This is the home page. So you'll just see some high-level data points here on this home page. Users who might be in bypass mode, users who may be locked out, inactive users. Great category to look into to see who you might want to kick off your Active Directory. If you scroll down, you'll also see kind of a graphical representation of your authentications over the last couple of days. And you'll also see in a more detailed format the last 10 login attempts. This is just on the home page. If you wanted to see a full authentication log, you can get 6 months worth of logs in your admin panel. And then you can also hook up a SIM or any other API to this admin panel to export a lot of this data for auditing purposes or to run your own analysis on it. It's pretty easy to get Duo talking to something external to push this data out. So just to take a look at a sample kind of authentication, so you can really see where that information about the devices is being collected. We'll take, this end user here. We'll see that they were logging into their Cisco AnyConnect. From a Windows machine, we could see their operating system. We saw that Flash and Java plugins weren't installed on their browser. We, at this point didn't require any kind of device health information to be shared with us, but we certainly could and have set policy on that. We identified it's not a trusted endpoint, meaning Duo has not placed a certificate on that machine. So it could be a personal device as opposed to one that you manage. And then we can also see that the user authenticated with the Duo push. So all authentication attempts can be kind of drilled down in this way. Should you want to come in here and start setting up an application with Duo, it's fairly intuitive. You'll hit Protect an Application. Depending on how common of a use case it is for Duo, a lot of our top use cases are named, so you can type them into this pick list here to get started setting up. So something like Microsoft OWA, you can type that in, hit Protect, and it also hyperlink to the documentation that we have in place for that specific integration. I should mention that me and my team of Duo specialists work closely with our solutions engineers, so we're always kind of at the ready to set up some of these use cases with you. But we also make it pretty available for you all to be self-sufficient on that front if you're the type who likes to kind of do it on your own time. So you'll see here we have a walkthrough video. It's only 7 minutes long, and we also have the instructions written out in case you prefer to read through them. But with a 7-minute long kind of setup video, you can probably get a pretty good idea about how easy it is to get Duo set up and integrated with your specific applications. So you can use this page as reference as you go through here and set up and insert the specifics of your OWA instance to get everything up and running. And on this application page itself is where you can apply specific application policies, group policies. You could even edit the global policy that applies across the board. Which brings me to our policy engine, which I would really encourage all of you at minimum to sign up for a Duo account just so you can see what this policy engine looks like. You can scroll through and toggle between all of these options. The whole engine is point and click, so I'm not the most technical person out there. I'm definitely not someone who'd be able to be an IT administrator or anything like that. But when it comes from the policy engine, the ability to kind of scroll through and say, hey, I actually do want to set some user location policies, and maybe instead I can say require 2FA for anyone in the United States, and for all other countries, deny access, because I know I'm not going to have any end users working from outside the United States. So I'm just going to nip that in the bud and set that policy right here and now. Then I can scroll down and set my remembered devices policy, as Pat was mentioning. So I can have my users choose to remember their device for 8 days. Maybe instead I want to do 30 days as the global policy, but then I'll override this with an application specific policy for our HR application, saying I don't want to remember devices for that specific one. Duo is always going to look at the most granular policy first in case there are ever contradicting policies. So in that instance, you'll see global policy is 30 days, but this feature is actually disabled for certain applications, in which case the latter policies are going to be what supersedes everything.
Hey, Madeline.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point out something. In the chat window, Steve Massey put a link out there for a doc of one of his customers, University of Alabama, to the question earlier about, making it easier for users to, to self-enroll and things like that. Evidently, this particular customer has put together a document that's online for their users to do self-service, make them easier. So everyone, that link is in the chat window. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you for that, Steve. Yeah, a lot of our higher ed customers have really amazing online wikis or FAQs that they set up ahead of deployment of Duo. So even for our non-higher ed customers, we like to send some of those landing pages for Duo around because they really do contain a lot of really great information, intuitive kind of infographics to share with end users ahead of that for everyone to have on hand. So whether you want to reference those or kind of screenshot some of that information and include it in emails you want to send out to your end users, it's pretty great and really valuable information that especially some of our higher eds have set up.
Hey, this is Ron from Transformix. I just want to add something. I've seen a large trend with my customer base. On your initial slide deck, right, that VPN remote access, we're seeing more and more cybersecurity insurance policy require MFA on VPN access. And, we've done a lot of transactions, recently with, a base level of Duo just to protect their AnyConnect, just to check that security box. And you're probably going to get to it. I may be jumping the gun a little bit, but if you can elaborate on the different levels of Duo subscriptions and what's required, that'd be great. And you're probably already getting to it, but just wanted to throw it out there.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to touch on that.
Yeah. Ron, I was going to add, Ron, that's a great point. As a matter of fact, we actually had a customer come to us with interest in Duo within the last, let's say, 30 days. And the compelling event was that they were trying to get some insurance, renew their insurance, and because they didn't have MFA in place, they weren't going to be able to renew that. And so they came to us came to us in Cisco looking for a Duo. So good point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly been a trend that we've been seeing. We've seen it for a long time, but particularly in the last few months when people have gone to re-up their cybersecurity insurance, we've seen a lot of people approach us either saying they were going to lose coverage altogether or their kind of insurance liability cap was going to greatly reduce if they didn't have MFA. And some of those insurance providers even called out the use cases that they would need to meet. And fortunately for Duo, because we're so flexible, a lot of those use cases were workstation logins, specifically for administrators, email access, which is a more web-based use case, and then also VPN use case. So all of those kind of have different setups technically, but they're still all very approachable and easy for Duo to accomplish. So as opposed to needing to have one solution for each use case and having your end users having to juggle a few different end user experiences, it's a situation where Duo just can kind of blanket cover your entire organization. It's just a matter of how you want to use it. And it's so easy to set up that some of our customers had 2 to 4 weeks of heads up from their insurance providers before they were going to see an impact in their coverage. But that didn't really, matter as much from a Duo perspective. We were able to get them covered pretty quickly. Two other things I want to touch on really quickly. One is this user section. So just to touch on how you might want to sync users over to Duo. So you can always add users manually. You're more than welcome to do that. But you also have the ability to set up a directory sync with Duo, whether it's Azure AD, Active Directory. You can even do an open LDAP connection with Duo as a way to sync over your users, maybe sync over any existing security groups you want to have for the purpose of group policy. And then that way Duo will automatically sync with that Active Directory or primary credential storage place once every 24 hours. So if you have a lot of movement in your organization and just want to kind of automize that, the directory sync is a great path to go. And then you can always initiate a sync If you want to sync over some users before that automatic 24 hours mark, it's pretty easy to hit the manual sync button, which would initiate it whenever you'd like. But pretty easy way to set up, and that way you can really carry over most of your users, especially if you anticipate wanting a lot of them to enroll in Duo. And then one other thing that I will touch on, because there was the question about kind of 2FA devices. So on the back end, you can always drill down into a specific user, and you can see their recent activity. And then if you needed to add an authentication method for them, like adding a phone, you could do that on the back end as well. So although we do kind of give a lot of freedom to the end user, that's not to say that as administrators of Duo, you don't also have that same kind of level of power to add an authentication method, or even remove an authentication method device from a user. Maybe they reach out saying that they lost their phone or their phone got stolen. Then you'd be able to kind of remove that phone from the user, kind of limit the security risk there. And then I said two things, but I'll make this one quick. But the reporting engine, I mentioned kind of how thorough it is, how much you can drill down into each access attempt, but you can also filter your results by authentication result, and then you can also filter it down by why users might have been blocked, to try and understand what might be the most common reason that people are out of compliance, and maybe you want to do some end user education on that information. But lots of information here. There's authentication logs. You can see administrator action logs, so history of actions being taken within the Duo admin panel by your own administrators, and you can filter by who that admin is. You can also see, I showed how to toggle between this in the other pane, but you can also just have a specific denied authentications page to do your own analysis. It's not, our demo account's not populating the data, it seems. But just wanted to call out that reporting feature. Apart from the solution itself, the reporting feature is a lot of our customers' kind of favorite components about Duo, is kind of how thoroughly we can report on some of the information and a lot of those auth logs. So with that, I will pull up our different editions of Duo. So you'll see here that we have, we'll ignore this first tier of Duo free, 3 different editions of Duo. I'd caution you to not pay too close attention to the list prices on this page. They are list prices, so if anything, think of them as a major price ceiling than anything like that, but we are transparent and do keep that externally facing. So Duo MFA, Duo Access, Duo Beyond are 3 different tiers. Duo MFA includes really all the authentication methods, the ability to integrate with pretty much all of your applications. We have a single sign-on system that you can leverage through Duo for your SAML applications. You can set certain baseline policies, the network-based policies, as well as user group policies can be set with Duo MFA. But pretty much all the other adaptive authentication and risk-based policies that I mentioned, whether it was location-based, whether it was the ability to block Tor networks, the ability to set policy based on operating system, out-of-date software, Flash Java plugins, all of that kind of stuff kicks in the Duo Access tier, which is here in this middle tier. And the big differentiator with Duo Beyond, which is that top tier, is that you're able to implement that trusted endpoints functionality. So that was the ability to essentially identify a personal or organization-owned device as such, and then setting access policy based on that information. So maybe you want to require a trusted device to access certain applications, whereas other applications you're fine if it's a personal device, but then you might want to implement some of these device hygiene policies in that circumstance. So that's the big kind of high level TLDR recap of the differences between the few different editions of Duo. Any questions on the admin panel, on the editions, anything like that?
Folks, if you have any questions, shout them out, put them in the chat window.
Yeah.
If you can elaborate like on the Duo editions, like when we're doing just ASA AnyConnect 2 auth, all we need is the MFA level, right? Can you give us some use cases for these different levels?
Yeah, so really any 2FA use case, whether it's email, your HR application, VPN, Windows workstations, third-party cloud apps, all of that can reside within Duo MFA. Where Duo Access would kick in is if you wanted to implement some other policy on top of the MFA that you're going to be requiring of that end user for that application. So whether that's the device-based policy, whether that's the geofencing location-based policy, blocking those anonymous networks policy, all of that starts kicking in at Duo Access. So it's not so much if you have a specific application you're looking to protect that automatically puts you in one of these buckets. It's more about what kind of risk-based policies are you going to want to invoke for your end user. So it's strictly just MFA for ASA. Duo MFA can totally protect you from that front. It's Duo Access and beyond that really have the policies, specifically a lot of the device-based policies that differentiate themselves from that base edition.
Yes, so it's really that profiling and posturing assessment that you're going to get with the Access and the Beyond, and
Yep.
just kind of some additional layers, right?
Yep.
Because what we see is we do see people that have other products that do profiling and posturing, right? You might have an overlap with ICE, you may have an overlap with ClearPass. So it's really kind of finding the right fit, for the customer and finding the right solution, right? Because what I find is you don't want to oversell them for something that they've got another product doing. You want to put them in the product they need and identify the gaps of what they're not covering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep,
anyway.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And as far as like best practice goes, there's any like web-based application, something like email in the mix, I typically encourage at least Duo Access to at least block access from maybe home computers or personal devices that might be running end of life operating systems. Maybe you can block out of date operating systems as well, but at minimum, just blocking end of life systems can be a really good kind of safety measure to take when you might have some personal devices accessing those web applications that can be kind of logged into from anywhere.
Madeline, we've got a couple of questions in the chat window. One
Sure.
is the pricing based on enrolled users or AD? That's the first question.
Great question. Yeah, so it's strictly on the users who you want to be impacted by Duo. It's not going to be everyone in your AD. It's going to be every kind of individual user who you're going to want authenticating with Duo.
Great.
Yeah, and let me elaborate on that a little bit more technical, just because I've helped with some deployments and scoping some deployments. When you install the Duo gateway that syncs your AD users, right? The first thing you want to do is create a Duo security group and put those users in it, and that's how your Duo users' license are going to be metered. Whoever's in that group is that an accurate assumption there, Maddie?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Madeline, we do kind of dovetailing into Ron's comment there. Can you chat just a bit about the gateways and proxies that could be in play and why one might use those?
Yeah, absolutely. So The Duo Authentication Proxy is essentially a listening device that you'll use to integrate Duo with LDAP and or radius-based applications. I can pull up one of our docs for that type of integration so you can kind of see what that would look like. As far as the authentication proxy goes, like I said, it's really just a listening device. I'll actually go back to there. That sits between the application, Active Directory, and then also is what reaches out to the Duo cloud to talk about and decide if this user is going to be challenged to MFA and what policies are going to be applied. So it's not too heavy of a lift to get the auth proxy set up, but it does come into play for those LDAP and radius-based use cases. The kind of Duo, we have two single sign-on solutions, both for SAML-based logins. We have the Duo Access Gateway, which is more of an on-prem single sign-on solution. And then we have Duo Central, which is a cloud-hosted single sign-on. In most cases, you'll leverage Duo Central because it's in the cloud. It is a little bit easier to set up. There are a few use cases that would require the Duo Access Gateway still, as we work to make sure that they're compatible with the cloud version. But that's a kind of high-level overview of when you would need each of those, and specifically when you would need that auth proxy and what that looks like.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I don't see any more questions. Looks like you've answered them all. Oh, wait, there is one just popped in. Please elaborate on Duo usage for AD elevated permission, such as RDP and or other usage of IDs with elevated permission.
Sure. So if I understand that correctly, so you can absolutely protect your RDP logins with Duo, and you can also determine whether you want that to just be admins with elevated privilege or anyone who's using RDP. Our documentation for both Win logons and RDP reside in the same piece of documentation. It's they're pretty similar setups, so they actually kind of share instructions here. But you're able to determine kind of who you want to prompt from this standpoint, and then also kind of what machines that you would want to be impacted from the Win logon standpoint. Furthermore, from an admin perspective, if you're protecting the, let's say like Windows Workstation, for example, you can also choose to enable Duo to be triggered at the UAC prompt for admins entering their credentials at that moment as well. So that would be another kind of elevated permission moment that you could layer Duo on top of. Not sure if that answered your question in full, but that's kind of a high-level overview.
Very good. Thank you.
It did. It
Yeah.
did. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And that's all the questions.
All right. Well, that's all I had for you all. I'll say one more thing, and that's you'll see this free trial here in the upper right-hand corner of every page on our website. We'd love it when people come to us and want to test out Duo. When you sign up for an account, it kicks off a fully featured, fully functional trial, unlimited number of users. So you can really get your hands on the product and see what it'll look like should you decide to become a customer. And then anything you set up during that trial period, if you do end up buying licenses, we just apply that to your existing account. So anything you set up, any users you enroll during that trial period will stay intact for you. You don't have to set up anything twice. So yeah, if you're interested, please definitely reach out. We can talk to you about your specific use cases, talk about what might be required to do some testing. And if it's not me who's going to be working with you from the Duo side, I'll be sure to get you introduced to the right people. We're all pretty passionate about the Duo product, and we're all very willing to talk about it. So definitely reach out. And if any questions come up after today too, that you forgot to ask on the call, please don't hesitate to reach out about that either. You can always reach out and we can answer those over a call or over email as well.
Well, very good. Well, Madeline, excellent, excellent info and an excellent product. Thank you for coming on and presenting for us and demoing for
Of
us.
course. Yeah, thanks
Um,
for having me.
Oh, glad we did it. And again, folks, we are recording this, so we'll be sending out the recording link. Please feel free to send this on to anyone in your organization you might find it useful. And so we will call an end to this. Hope you have a rest of your day as a great one, and we'll be looking for you on the next Transforming Tech Talk. Everyone have a great day.